You're listening to the Flickcast, a podcast about stuff nerds love. I am Chris Ulrich, and joining me, of course, my co-host and genius savant that he is, Joe Dilworth. Hey, Joe.
You keep building this up, man, and people are going to be like, "Who's this loser that he's talking to?"
I just like to build you up, man. There's no reason not to build you up because the world is full
I
of
appreciate that.
negativity in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of people tearing other people down. I don't want to be that person for you. So,
Well, you know what? In my day job, I'm a people leader, and we're all about uplifting people and building people up. So I appreciate that.
you're a
Thank
people
you.
leader, a purple
Thank you.
one.
Yes, people. Hey, I don't even know how that
Remember,
song goes anymore.
one-eyed,
Just
one-eared, giant purple people eater. Is that what it is? I can't remember.
people leader. Yes, I'm going to change that.
There you
now,
go. Yeah.
so.
So that's a song, folks. In case you don't know, it's like Octopus's Garden, but it's not it's a people eater, not an octopus. So
Yeah, nice segue. By
thanks.
the way.
Yeah, we're going to talk about on this episode of the Flickcast. We're going to discuss more about Get Back, and we're going to discuss episode 1 of season 6 of The Expanse, or also known as The Expanse, because I can't say Expanse apparently. And also episode 4 of Hawkeye. We're partners, right? So, but first, I just want to let everybody know that I got my booster shot, and so if I seem a little bit out of it, it's because I kind of feel out of it a little bit because I got my shot yesterday, and so. But I'll try my best not to suck.
You seem fine, and I just want to say enjoy your new 10G reception. I understand that's what the booster brings.
I think so. Yeah, I didn't get
to the yard.
I did not get better reception on my phone, so I don't know what is happening. I think I was lied to. All I'll get is increased safety from COVID. So I guess that's enough. But
all you conspiracy theorists on vaccines, just let it be.
Let it be.
Hey, did you like how I did that?
So yeah, let's get back for a minute. We did talk about it quite a bit last week, but I think it bears more scrutiny or more discussion, or at least a little bit. So my only question for you, or not my only question, but my one question for you is there's a thing in filmmaking, obviously, and a thing in documentaries called point of view, right? So there's been a lot of discussion about how this particular docuseries sort of shows Yoko in a new light, for example. Not that she was like the worst destabilizing influence of the band. But I was curious if you thought that Peter Jackson had a point of view, and you think that it came through in that, and it was his point of view, as a second question, to try to show that it wasn't just Yoko's fault.
I think so. I don't know if that was. I don't think that was the main focus, but I think, like any documentary filmmaker, and yes, he didn't shoot the footage, but anybody making a documentary has a point of view or things they want to get across about their subject going in, right? I mean, it's rare when a documentary is just like, here's what happened, warts and all, blah blah blah. So yeah, I think he had multiple ideas for this. Chief among them to show that it wasn't just a month of them yelling at each other and hating each other and all that kind of stuff. And honestly, I don't know that it was presented that way in the Let It Be documentary because I never watched it. Haven't really had the opportunity to watch it, but maybe soon.
Yeah, it's not. It makes them look like they're breaking up and miserable for the most part. So yeah.
And I think, I think because that's been, the joke, quote unquote, for 50 some years now, or 50 years, that, Yoko came in and broke up the Beatles. Although from time to time it's been extended to include Linda McCartney as well, or Linda, whatever her last name was at the time. But I don't know. I don't think that's true. I mean, and I'm sure you would agree. And we can get into it. I think there's some very obvious reasons why they were heading towards a breakup. I think, as you pointed out before the show, chief among them is the fact that Brian Epstein wasn't around anymore.
Right. Yeah. I think if they'd had him, they would have at least been able to get through this a lot easier. Because the thing that I found interesting upon watching it again, and also hearing a lot of reviews and discussion about the docuseries, is that there was like Michael Lindsay Hogg, for example, was representative of all the outside influences on the Beatles, like all the things that Glenn, that their manager would have handled. but it's like he's commercialism, he's this, he's that, and that shows like how distracted Paul was, and especially when they went to Twickenham in the beginning, they were all like lost in this giant. It's a really good metaphor actually, because they were lost in this giant room trying to record, and they were kind of lost and rudderless in a way because they didn't have that. Like
Yes.
Paul said several times, like we need a daddy influence, which is true, they did, and I think that they would have. Done a much better job. And I don't think there would have been as much conflict, because part of the reason is Paul is just like this whole escalating idea of what this thing is going to be. And Michael Lindsay Hogg is like, well, we're going to do a TV show. We're going to get a boat and take everybody to eat to Greece or whatever the fuck. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you know, so there would have been a manager, there would have been a guy there saying, no, we're going to have to nip this shit in the bud. The idea is to finish the album. And also to tell Paul, you know, you don't have to finish 14 songs in 2 weeks.
Right.
You know,
right.
I know you
exactly. That was insane.
I know you haven't had a single in 6 months, but it's cool. You know, you can, you know, people aren't going to forget who you are necessarily. So it's just, they needed that influence. And also something that I found interesting is that if the Beatles, and you and I talked about this a little bit before we started recording the main show, is if the Beatles existed kind of today, they would have known more that, you know, they could go off and do solo projects. They didn't have to break up. Like George could have gone and done an album, and they all could have gone and done albums, and they could have gotten back together. So I'm wondering if Epstein was still alive, if they'd just been able to do that, they could have come back together in a couple of years and recorded more Beatles albums. I mean, I don't know.
Well, George actually brought that up at one point. He's like, you know, I've been thinking maybe it would be a good idea for us as a band to go and do our solo stuff. He goes, I could go do my album, you guys could do whatever, and then we come back together.
Yeah.
I think the constant, I mean, they did 2 albums, their last 2 albums within 2 months of each other. And that's just kind of crazy.
It is, yeah.
I think if honestly, I think Epstein would have recognized these guys are getting burned out. Let's let them go do their stuff. And then they come back, like you said, in 2 or 3 years, and they do a Beatles album. I think they might have stayed together as a band, kind of like the Rolling Stones did that, and a lot of other bands from that era that are still together have either had multiple lineups, or they've gone off and done their solo stuff and then come back together and do a Who album or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that would have been huge. The other thing, though, I think, and maybe Epstein would have helped push for this. Even if they didn't have that, one of the things I think probably would have helped was, John was really pushing for Billy Preston to join the band. My wife was watching part of this with me, and she noted that when Billy Preston came in, like the whole atmosphere just
definitely
completely changed. They were like much more positive and happy, and that was just amazing. And I think, why not have 5 people in the band? Why not?
Well, that's it. They talked about, because George was talking about Clapton. He's like, yeah, Clapton, whatever. And then at one point when George leaves, Paul's like, well, let's just get Clapton in here. But they never did get him. They got Billy Preston. But you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
But I think also part of that was the switch from Twickenham to Apple as well, because they were in a space they could control. They were in a much more intimate kind of situation where they felt more at home, and it was their like first time in the studio and everything. And so they were just, the energy was different for sure. The vibe was different than in this giant cavernous stage where they felt lost, and people are like walking around. There's boom mics in their head, bashing them in the head, and there's people with cameras everywhere. And that's the other thing too to keep in mind, is that you're on camera, and so people will tend to, at least in my experience, people tend to act slightly different when they're on camera, or even more than slightly different.
Yes.
So they're going to either suppress some of the things they're feeling, or going to act a certain way, or they're going to act out more, or whatever. But the cameras being there definitely influences people's behavior. So I think that might have had an effect on John in particular, where he kind of almost seemed more reserved in a lot of ways. It was just sort of chilling with Yoko. And, people give Yoko a lot of problems, but I kind of feel like in some ways Yoko was more of an emotional kind of stability thing for him, because she was there with him and he was like sort of sitting with her. And I think that made him feel better, because I feel like he was maybe more vulnerable in a lot of ways. But the thing that I found interesting too is when George left, they went and met with George. And in the first meeting, Yoko was speaking for for John. And the meeting went terrible.
That was kind of
right. And the meeting went horribly.
Exactly.
But then they met again, and she wasn't there, and they all talked, and then they got back together.
Yes.
So
I
it goes both ways. I think
so
she was great. She was helpful to John, but I think she was disruptive to the rest of the band in a lot of ways, especially Paul. Paul didn't
well,
like it.
two things I think that lead me to believe um, that I don't think she was the thing that broke up the Beatles. I think she was just kind of like not necessarily an excuse, but it's like, oh well, here's one more thing to add to the pile of acrimony, and it kind of pushed things. But there's two parts that I found interesting to kind of refute that, and that's one. There's one scene when they're at Twickenham when I can't can I not say that right? Twickenham, yeah. When John
Twickenham.
and Yoko were leaving, and they were kind of over, and a bunch of people are fawning over them, and everybody else is sitting over on the other side, and Paul makes this comment. He's like, "Oh yes, John and Yoko, as everyone knows, couple of years." Kind of like a really sarcastic comment, but then he kind of realizes what he says, and then they give him this whole time where he's talking about, they just want to be together. They're in love and they want to be close together. So who am I to say that that's a bad thing? And you go, I totally get it. And to me, that seemed to be him kind of like being okay. It's like, you know what? In the ultimate scheme of things, who cares, right? And it seemed like he became at peace because there's a couple times later, once at Twickenham and once at Apple, where they're taking a break, or everybody else is off doing something, having lunch or whatever, and Paul and John and Yoko are jamming together. Paul's playing
Yeah.
drums, John's playing guitar, and she's doing her screaming thing. But he seems to like really be into it and enjoying it. So I don't think
Yeah.
that they had a problem with her per se, and I think if Epstein was around, first of all, she probably wouldn't be
Yeah.
in the recording with him. But even if she was, I think other factors would have made it so it's like no big deal and nobody would have
But the
cared.
thing that I found interesting too is that even though she was there, she never actually interjected herself into the conversation about creativity, especially. She
No,
never said, "Oh, you should do this or that" or anything. She never said a word, basically. I mean, she was doing her taxes
right?
or she was, reading the paper or
Yes,
knitting John a sweater
yes,
or whatever. But she never
right.
actually, said, "Hey, boys, this is how you should do this song." She never was part of the process. That's what I'm saying. I think she was more of a emotional sort of support for John, because John is
Right.
like the
Yeah.
quintessential sensitive artist, I think, in a lot of ways. It's like he was, he has a lot more emotions maybe than the rest. Paul was like musician, businessman, professional, whatever. And George and Ringo. I mean,
Yes.
the person who also I feel the worst for in a way is Ringo, because he's like, there's no drum machines. There's, I've got to
Right.
sit here and do
Right.
this every time for weeks. And I'm not even involved in like basically in the creative process of these songs at all. My job is just go, and
Yeah.
you can see his face sometimes. He's like half asleep. He's like, oh God, let's just. But you know what, man?
And deal
That
with Paul telling him how to play it
yeah,
sometimes
that
too.
guy is a trooper though, man. And he
He
comes across.
is.
But
Yeah.
you have to think about the times that this came out, that this was being done. There was no internet. There was no deadline or whatever. There was no TMZ or any of that shit. I mean, there was like, you get the information you get from a few sources, right? You get the Beatles Today, like their official fan club thing. You get some newspaper reports, but that's it. So all
Right.
you
Right.
hear is the Beatles broke up, and it has to be someone's fault, and it can't be that they didn't get along or whatever. So people just, this whole mythology came
Yeah.
with Yoko and whatever. But one thing I did find funny, and you're talking about how Paul was sort of accepting of Yoko, but there is a point where when Linda McCartney's child, when Heather shows up, the little girl, and
Yes.
she's kind of making fun of Yoko when she's
I
doing.
I didn't look at it as her making
I
fun of
kind
it.
of did a little bit.
I looked at it as that she was like, as kids do, it's like,
She would.
that's different and interesting. I'm going to do
I
that.
don't know. Okay,
And I thought that
maybe
was,
you're right. Maybe I'm just
yeah.
a cynic, but I kind of felt like it was a subtle dig, a little bit. But maybe not. Maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe I'm just cynical, like I said. But it was interesting to have her around so much and towards the end. But that's also when Billy showed up, and so it was a different sort of situation. But
Yeah.
like you pointed out, Linda would sort of come in and stay for a few minutes, for a while, take some pictures and leave, and then the other girlfriends or whatever wives would show up and then leave, and
Yeah.
so. But
Yeah. I
Yoko
mean,
was
Yoko is the one that was right
right,
there. I,
but I don't
it's
think
funny
she
because,
would have been there if John didn't want her there, though.
no, and I think I agree with you. I think they were extremely codependent, and I don't
Yeah,
I know that has negative connotations, and I think they honestly, other than the period of time where they were separated and he went off to New York and or I guess London or wherever it was and was a weirdo for a while, which kind of proves the point that they really needed each other because he had he called it his was it lost weekend or whatever for it was it 3 months or whatever. But I just think they were codependent in good ways and just really. I think they brought out the best in each other, to be honest. And I know a lot of people argue that, and they think she was terrible for him, but I disagree. And I can see him wanting, his, anchor, for lack of a better term, to be there even while he's creating. It's funny because at the beginning of watching this, it to me it was like weird. I'm like, what is she doing right there in the room? Blah blah. And then quickly over the course of the first episode, that totally went away. And then it seemed like, well, she's just part of it, right? It just seemed normal. It was weird.
Well, I mean, you
So
could
it
also make
was,
the case if you're talking about a film from a filmmaking perspective that Yoko is us, right? Because we're sitting there with her, kind of. She's the
right,
audience in a way.
right,
So we're sort of experiencing all this not through her perspective, but at least at the same sort of level that she is. I mean, we're sitting in the chairs, kind of watching all this happen too. So it's fascinating, and I'm sure that people will discuss this docuseries for a long time. It's just, it's fascinating. Again, it's fascinating to look at the creative process and how, people just, things come together, but it's also hard work. And it's just, people you don't necessarily know that well, except what you've heard in the past. And this all took place, 50 years ago, right? So it's like,
yeah,
you,
yeah,
you get a new insight, I think, into the band and into, creativity. And if you've ever sat in a room with musicians trying to create something, then you feel for these guys. I mean, I've,
There-
or in a room trying to create anything. It's just you definitely
yeah.
understand what they're going through and the highs and the lows and the really really lows, and then the really really highs. So it's just like a roller coaster,
Right.
which is why I found it fascinating. I think because it just is fascinating.
Yeah.
So
I like the little things that we got insight into. Like, I know the big focus obviously is on Paul and John as a songwriting duo, but the sequence where George is helping Ringo figure out Octopus's Garden was just like, wow, that was really cool. It's like you don't hear a lot of the Harrison Starr collaboration, right? But it's like, oh, that's really interesting. And
yeah,
then as you pointed out last week when we were talking about it, at the parts in episode 3 where it was like, this is the version that was on the album. So like all these songs that have been for me since a kid, just kind of ingrained, that I knew by heart, that I knew all the pieces to, seeing them actually recording it and the quality that was in was, I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty emotional. It was just like, wow, that's what was happening when they recorded that song, especially the ones on the rooftop. But it was just, I don't know, there was a lot of feels coming out of this one. Let's say, chief among them, it's like, goddamn Mark David Chapman. All I got to say, but it's
yeah.
just,
Let's not get too depressed. But yeah, I mean, who knows
yeah,
what would have happened? And as you and I talked about before we
yeah,
started recording the main episode, what would have happened if Epstein was still around? Would they have
yeah,
lasted
yeah,
longer? They could have split up and done their own things and come back, and maybe we keep getting Beatles albums every few years. Well, until 1980, unfortunately. But yeah.
right.
So
But
I don't want to finish this on a downer. The other thing I
yes,
want to shout out to, not that it matters at this point. Although he's still alive, is Mr. Glenn Johns, who, by the way, is
yeah,
just watching this again. He's just so fucking cool. I mean, his outfits are awesome, and his sunglasses, and his like. He's like, we don't have a mixing board, but I'm gonna just make one. It's like, I'm just gonna build this shit. And he had to figure it out for a few minutes. I mean, there was some times when he was like trying to tweak stuff and coming in and moving mics around. But the reason that the sound is so good, I think, is in a lot of ways is due to him. The fact that you have a 50-year-old audio recording from a rooftop and it
yeah,
sounds so good, given the technology, 8-track analog recording, given the technology that existed at the time and the quality of the microphones and everything. It's just, almost a miracle that it's so well done. And also, good job to the sound guys who were recording with the Nagras, as we talked about before, getting all the audio too,
Yes,
because those things are, again, one of the best audio recording devices ever invented back in the day, especially. But even now, I would say they're still pretty good. So,
I thought that in a way, to me, Glenn Johns was almost kind of a Epstein influence that they needed, because I found it funny at the beginning when they were getting to the recording phase. It was almost like they were a little annoyed with him because he kept going, nope,
yeah,
we got to adjust this, we got to
yeah,
do this, but then when they got into it, it's like, oh, I see, and he was,
yeah.
he was as much a perfectionist as them, but I think he got the best out of them, and he didn't seem to ever be phased by any crap that they were giving him. He's like, look, I'm here to do a job, and I'm going to do it. So,
Right. Well, that's it. And the proof was in when they all went into the mixing room and they're like, "Oh, this does
yeah,
sound pretty
yeah,
good." So, I mean, they believed in him before, but I think it was just a product of they were so starting at Twickenham was a mistake, obviously, and having this whole
yes,
thing, being so convoluted at points, and all the conflict and everything. He was just another person interrupting them and getting in the way and trying to tweak stuff. But once they got to Apple, things were a lot better. I mean, he was also, again, building this stuff from scratch in a way. This kind of
right.
equipment didn't. I mean, it existed maybe in some respects, but he was kind of inventing the wheel almost right now. So
What was it? They lashed two 4-track decks together to do an 8-track thing. It's like, that's insane. I mean, it's like technology today. It's like, oh, we'll just go buy this, and it's like there was no let's go buy what we want. I mean, he was almost like kind of the James Cameron of his day, but with sound. It's
yeah.
like, okay, I know the sound I want to get. Technology doesn't exist, so I'm going to make it. It's like, geez,
Well, I
that
mean,
was
he's
insane.
he's so influential, especially with regard to recording drums, for example. I mean, there's a thing called the Glenn Johns method where you
Right.
record drums. It's not like it's the guy's a definite influence. He has a really interesting book, actually. I read his book a while ago because I was I'm interested in audio recording, obviously because we do a podcast, but just I find it fascinating the sort of people, like behind the scenes guys, the crew. I've always been interested in. So it's just his book is interesting for sure. If you haven't read it, it's I'm trying to remember the name of it. It is, I guess it's an autobiography. Oh, Sound Man, that's what it's called.
Oh, well, there you go. That works.
Sense, yeah. So, but again, he's also at least on the internets, a lot of the ladies and some of the gentlemen as well were like, wow, he was all right. And so
The,
very fashionable. But there's this whole I saw an article yesterday, I think it was about the fashions of of the Beatles, and they were like, wow, those guys are really hip. I'm like, yeah, no shit, you know.
yeah, they were. I was like, I know it's 1969, but I'd wear some of those shirts. Those are
Seriously,
looking
well, the
cool.
thing that people forget maybe sometimes is that it's January 1969, right?
That's
The
true.
summer of
Yeah.
love hadn't really happened yet, and the hippie thing, all that movement hadn't quite built to a crescendo. And these guys were still products of the 50s, right? So they were just exploring their own sort of ideas of things. But I mean, and George was coming in with some great outfits, like his pink boots and you know his pink sweater. I mean, good for him. But and Ringo, I mean, anyway, it's just it's the reason that fashion is one of those things that it comes around because things that were fashionable style. I guess my point is that style is different than trends, right? If you have style, it doesn't matter how old you are or what you're wearing in a way because you make it look good. So
Yes,
it's
exactly.
just kind of funny. And this isn't a fashion podcast, obviously, because if you could see what Joe and I are wearing, you'd be disgusted probably. But
Yeah, no, there's a reason why
there's
we're
a
not
reason
in
why we're not
the,
doing video. But I don't want to
yeah.
have to look nice. So, but it's again fascinating, which is why we wanted to come back and talk about it some more. I imagine we could talk about it for hours, but then I wonder if the rule of thumb is you should devote more time to discussing something than the runtime of the thing that you watch.
Oh, right.
So I don't know.
Yes.
I heard that on NPR. So it's like so we really, if this is like more than 8 hours, we should be talking about this for like 16 hours. So, but that's not what this
So we'll do a special edition
the Get
podcast
Back
that is,
special. Yeah.
yeah, it'll be a 10 or 12 hour
That's
podcast.
right. And then we'll have some Yoko Ono spoken word, whatever stuff in here. So
or we could do like the 24-hour version and talk about that, but we edit it down to 12 hours for consumption so that everybody goes. So here's my question, because Peter Jackson made a point of going, yeah, I have an 18-hour version. Not that I think that one would be, but do you think in the inevitable home, Blu-ray home release version that we're going to get some kind of extended cut? Because he's famous for
I
those.
mean, maybe, but this is kind of a lot. So I feel like maybe there'll be, because there's like a 2.5 hour cut in there somewhere, right? With like the
Yes.
highlights,
Yes.
which you could do
Right.
theatrically, even if you wanted to. I think there's an audience for that. Maybe the more casual Beatles fan or the more casual whatever. Because this, if you think about it, is really kind of more for hardcore fans or for people like, I mean, I love the Beatles, but again, they're not my most favorite band of all time. But I'm just fascinated by the entire process of how this came about, and also
Yes.
just the
Yeah.
creative process in general. So for me, it was worthwhile and very very enlightening. But I think there's a 2.5 hour cut maybe that could be released. Will we see a longer one? I don't know. It's hard to believe that they would do that. Maybe. I mean, maybe they'll do a 10-part documentary on Disney Plus next year. I don't know, but I doubt it.
Yeah, I agree. I was, it wouldn't surprise me knowing Peter Jackson and his previous releases, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. I'm looking at you, but
Well, I mean, the
I
Lord of
think
the
this
Rings,
is
it made more sense. It was one movie per book. The Hobbit, though, was a travesty.
right,
Three
right.
movies for one book. I mean, even like it's almost like The Hobbit's kind of a pamphlet in a way too. So anyway,
But this one's kind of different because not just because it isn't necessarily his footage. Obviously, he's been given, allowed to do what he wants. But I think there's a lot more. I think if he was to do a longer version, there would be the whole uh, approval process to go through. That's a
yeah,
lot more rigorous with this.
I'm sure.
So
Well, I mean, I don't know what the approval process was. Whether anybody had any kind of cuts they wanted to make, any of the families or any of the surviving Beatles, if they said no, I don't want to show that. I kind of feel like they let him do what he wanted to do in a way. They didn't
yeah,
really interfere. I mean, as a courtesy, because they're also producing the thing that he shows them a cut. But I feel like if you're hiring somebody like Peter Jackson, you don't necessarily expect him to come in short, for one thing. But also, you want someone to come in with a different perspective, who wasn't there, who's not intimately involved in the thing. Like, I mean, that was one negative thing you could say about Michael Lindsay Hogg is that he was also a subject of the documentary too. He was in the movie, so
he influenced it as it was
right.
made,
He can't
literally.
be.
I mean,
So it's not his point of view. His perspective is not objective. Whereas someone like Peter Jackson, who although is a Beatle fan and maybe had an idea of the story he wants to tell based on the footage, I also feel like he kind of let the footage tell the story too.
yeah,
With the editors and whatever. But I think that someone else could come along and look at everything that he's got and maybe cut something shorter and maybe just hit the higher points and hit the sort of whatever the milestones or whatever. Not Peter Jackson, maybe a different person, just to do that, because he's probably too intimately involved in the footage now too. So if they were going to do that, I think it would be beneficial to have another pair of eyes on it who hasn't really spent as much time with it. So I mean, 4 years is a long time to look at something. So
that's true. And I think ultimately, I'm just glad. I'm glad that we got this insight because it was. Um, I don't have words to describe what it means, honestly. But having been a Beatles fan since I can remember, and I think I said this last week. I've always been there's the Beatles, and then there's all other music in my mind. So seeing this and getting to, my first thing is man, I want one of these for every album they made.
yeah, unfortunately,
And obviously, yeah,
I wish they'd done with Abbey Road too, but they didn't, unfortunately. But
yeah, that would have been
well, you can always
interesting.
watch,
But
Help or something if you really feel, or Yellow Submarine if you feel,
sure,
if you want to drop some acid and do
but
whatever.
yeah, I just think this was done. It was done obviously from the intention of being a fly on the wall and showing the process, and it was great. And obviously, as a fan, seeing the full rooftop concert was just phenomenal. And again, as I pointed out earlier, seeing the parts where they're a little caption would come up. This is the version used on the
Yeah, that
album.
was cool.
It's just
Yeah.
wow. Wow,
Yeah,
that's just amazing. So, I thank you, Peter Jackson. This
yeah.
was fantastic, and um, yeah, I think everybody should watch it, even if you're not necessarily um, a Beatles fan. Well, maybe it's just me because I really love these kind of insight
It's not just you. I
documentaries.
think a lot of people are watching it. So
I mean, even like the one that was done several years ago about Metallica, I thought was fascinating because it gave an insight into, okay, so what you think these guys are not necessarily what they really were, right? So, and I think the same thing kind
yeah,
of with this. Everybody has scrutinized and talked about the Beatles like to death over the years, and everything's been analyzed, and yet this comes along and it's stuff that existed as footage, and it's like, and here's something brand new about this band. It's like, wow,
right.
that's pretty cool. So,
Right, and also
uh,
one other shout out, Peter Jackson, obviously you said, but also to Jabez Olson, the
yes.
editor, who did a
I'll also give a shout out only because I've been a runner for
to the
musicians
T boy
for
too, right?
before. Yes, their roadie that brought he was like that guy. It's funny because everybody else you could tell, even like their friends and Glenn Johns and everybody, it's like this is the Beatles that we're working for, and he was just like nonplussed. He was
Well, he
like, I'm gonna do my
well, yeah, he'd
stuff,
been with them for
and
a long time though, so it's like
yeah, I know, but it was just like he's just
it wasn't his
like
job to comment on the music or anything. His job was to bring the tea and the
yeah,
toast. So much toast,
and he
so
did it
much
well.
toast, unbelievable. So anyway,
So
oh yeah, so a great opportunity to see things as they were and sort of think about it at a
yeah.
different time, and and all that stuff. So it's really worth watching if you haven't watched it. It is a time commitment, but you might want to make the commitment just to experience something that you're never going to see probably ever again.
Absolutely.
So
Yep.
all right, so we're going to go to the Expanse, which I'm so speaking of things we're probably never going to
Yeah.
experience again. Sad, but true. I'm a little.
Speaking of Get
Speaking of
Back,
Get Back, yeah, finally the Expanse has premiered its new season of sadly, only 6 episodes. But I'll take 6 episodes more than zero for sure. But it's one of those shows that even though it's been off for a while, you as soon as it starts, you sort of slip back into it. Like it's very familiar and very and
yes,
that's
yes,
great. You know these characters pretty well, and you know their situations, and the stakes. Even though the stakes seem much higher even now in this final season, but it was a real pleasure to come back to this world and go back to it. And everybody's kind of where you left them in a way, but not really 100% where you left them. But it was really cool. And I'm excited. This episode was great. So what did you think?
yes. I
All right,
loved
let's
it.
let's
I
move on.
thought it
Let's
was
move on then.
yeah, yes, I agree.
Okay.
Anyway, no, much like you said. I mean, you said it all well, but yeah,
Sorry.
it's been that universe is so rich and well built that it is easy just to step right back in, and it's like, oh, this is familiar, and I'm glad to be back. Let's see what our friends are up to. Um, the thing that struck me is even it's interesting that it to me it got a little meta because the crew of the Rocinante is kind of devastated over the loss of Alex. And I thought that was interesting, despite whatever you may think about Cass Anvar and whatever
Well, they had
happened.
to be Alex. I
We
mean,
won't really know.
they cut to the
But
plaque. I mean, they cut to the plaque. And they showed it,
yeah, and
and
they
freaking,
yeah,
he's looking at that, going, "Fuck, Alex is dead," and that it affects them. They
yeah.
can't just ignore it, right? So,
Yeah, so I like that they're honoring the character and also in a way kind of letting the actors kind of mourn losing, a member of the cast
sure,
and also the audience. And it's like, yeah, we're not just gonna go, Andy died, let's move on. It's like, no, this had that has an impact on him. He's been one of the, for lack of a better term, Fantastic Four for the
yeah.
last several seasons, and now he's gone. So I thought it was nice that they honored the character that way. Yeah, I thought that was really classy and good. And it also puts them in a weird place too, right?
Well,
So
it's good in a way because it helps bring conflict, right? I mean, in this episode, look at the conflict Naomi and Amos, right? I mean, they never really
Yeah,
had
yeah,
conflict before in a way. Amos is like, well, you left us, and then she's mad about Al. She's trying to take Alex's place, blah blah blah. So it's like they're using it for dramatic purposes, but this is what would happen in a tight knit family if one of the family members dies. I mean, and also Naomi probably feels extra guilty because she thinks, remember, if you remember the flight in the previously, she's like, Alex died saving me, that kind of thing.
right,
So
right.
it's just you know, a random thing that happens in space, and it was, I don't know, people may think that was handled poorly. I kind of think it was good because it kind of hangs on the episodes now. If they're going to do high speed maneuvering now, who's going to die? Is someone else going to die because of that or whatever? It
Yeah,
definitely,
yeah,
it's, how do you handle a character's exit or a cast member's exit? When you're basically firing them.
right.
I thought it was handled pretty well, and it definitely will help spark dramatic things that happen in the show, and that's what you want. You want characters to deal with kind of stuff. You want there to be conflict, and you want there to be all this stuff. So it's good drama. But I was happy to see.
Good
I was happy to see
drama.
everybody. The one character I don't like is Marco. I don't know. He just bothers me. But
I did not. I thought he was the weakest part of the previous season, and I don't know. Um, to, I. It seems like to me that they're still writing Marco as kind of a one-dimensional character, and the actor playing him isn't doing anything to elevate that. He's playing him that way, and I to me, and I think we discussed this before, in a show fictional universe where all the characters are very rich and have multiple sides and are very three-dimensional. He kind of stands out to me as a sore thumb.
yeah, I mean,
And
you need a villain, obviously, and but I
yeah,
would say that the villain is not him. I think the idea it's it's Earth versus the Belt, right? That the real villain
yes,
is our differences and conflict and all that stuff. It's not
yes,
Marco is just a catalyst for this kind of thing that was going to happen anyway. And with the gate and all this other stuff, it's just he's just and in that respect, he doesn't necessarily have to be maybe as strong a villain because he's not gonna. I mean, maybe they're deciding maybe his son is gonna the kid is a little hothead, so maybe who knows.
yes.
But I don't know.
I guess to me, it's like I get. It was obvious that the story was heading in the direction that eventually there was going to be some kind of conflict between the Belters and the Inners. Uh, but to me, and I think it's like it's justified. It's been building to that, and they've been doing a really good job of showing lots of viewpoints. I mean, not all the Belters are behind him. Obviously, not all the Earthers are on the inner side, and
Right.
they just made this really complex and rich conflict that they were building to. And to me, it's kind of ruined by this guy that's almost like, hey, hold on a second, let me go put my eyeshadow on, or my, hold on,
Uh,
let me turn just right so that I look my
well,
best,
is that
and
him or is that the
no,
character? Is the character sort of a preening kind of, I don't know, peacock is the only word I can think of.
I think he
He's
is,
he's
and he's
he's
got
pl-
this
he's
like
playing, yeah.
ego, and to me that I'm like that ruins, that just takes me out of the whole thing, because this universe that we're hanging out in is not pretty, and it's not, I don't know, it's just kind of like, so are you just doing this to do it, or do you actually believe in the cause that you're doing, or are you just relishing the chaos and death and destruction you're
Well,
causing?
I feel
But
like yeah,
they don't even really lead him in. I don't know, it just seems like
I feel like he's just
I don't know.
he just wants the attention. I feel like he's an attention whore. Basically, I mean, I hate to. It's hard to write a. I don't know how he is in the book because I haven't read the book, but it's hard to write a sort of tin pot dictator without being influenced by certain former quote unquote presidents. So I kind of feel like he's in some ways just addicted to the adulation and the circumstance and the pomp and being on top and being the center of
Yeah,
attention. He's an attention whore, like I said, and he doesn't really have a plan necessarily, except fuck the Earthers, right? And so that's why he doesn't want to hear about how we going to feed people, how we going. He's like, I'm not, I'm only interested in the adulation of the people. I'm not really interested in, I don't have a long term plan because maybe deep down he didn't realize he was going to get this far. It's like, who knows?
To me, it would have been more convincing, and it would have been a more interesting bad guy if it turned out this is what Dawes was building to this whole time. And I understand Jared Harris is busy doing other stuff,
Yeah.
but if it had been, this is kind of the thing that Dawes was manipulating everybody to the whole time, to me, that would have been more interesting and more convincing, because it just kind of seemed like he came out of nowhere last season.
He kind of did, yeah.
Like,
I mean, you're right, and because Jared Harris is also a much better actor too. That helps, but
true.
I would love to see him come back for the final parts. Maybe, but he won't. I know, but it would just be. I think you're reacting to the way the character is written, but also just the performance is not fantastic. But I feel like, this is the direction he's been given, and these are the takes that they pick in the editing, and it's like they're obviously positioning him to be something. But I feel like people are just going to get tired of him at some point, maybe, and just like there's going to be his girlfriend or whatever, the second in command, she's going to like get tired of him, just like kill him, and that's
just space.
I'm just tired of your bullshit. But I mean, I don't know. I just want to see. I want to see. Everybody get together. I want to see Bobby get on La Rocinante. I want to see this whole thing. Come together. But I would watch an entire show just about Avasarala too. She's just so good.
She's the best.
It's in a time of war. It's none of your fucking business. That's what politicians want to say to the reporters. I'm sure.
Right.
She's like, I'm not going to tell you because what I'm doing. And like Bobby hates this job. You're just going to go with them and find out what's going on. But I don't know. It's building to something. I know people who've seen the entire 6 episodes were saying that it's very satisfying ending, but not as satisfying as it would have been if there'd been more episodes, probably. But
right.
But I'm just happy to have 6, and maybe if it gets well received, there's still a couple more books, right? So they can just do those.
There's still about another 5 or 6 books.
Is there? Oh,
because
there you go.
At the end of book 6, there's a time jump.
Right.
And they've been kind of like the writers and some of the producers and stuff have been hinting that, if a lot of people watch this and really like it, we've been considering how we might continue the story in a different way or something like that. So I would say I would absolutely watch more. I'm glad that we're getting what sounds like a complete story, and we got 6 seasons of this, and it's just an amazing show.
Well, yeah. The fact that it got canceled and brought back by Amazon, it's like it's got a tough. It had a tough road. So again, I'm definitely not looking at whatever they say, gift horse in the mouth or whatever. But I'm very happy to have more of the show, and I think it's going to be, it's going to be cool and probably bittersweet, but hopefully they'll get to finish by telling the story that they want to tell, and people will be happy. And
it's definitely something over the years that I'll rewatch the series.
Sure.
Multiple times, because it will be great once it's completed to go back and rewatch, straight through and see the whole story go. And I think this is I don't know, it's probably one of the best, not only best sci-fi shows I think that's been on quote unquote TV, but even just best dramatic shows. I mean, it's just extremely well written and acted, except for Marcos. And but
you can say whatever you want about it. I mean, the show, I mean, it's, maybe it's not getting or wasn't getting the high ratings that other things might have got or whatever, but and you can, whatever you want to assign a relative merit to Rotten Tomatoes, but it is a show that gets 100% on Rotten Tomatoes every season. So it's like,
it does.
Critics obviously enjoy the show. People enjoy the show because it's so well done. You believe it, and you're interested in the characters, and they have flaws and they have conflict, and they're not perfect people. It's not like Star Trek where everybody's trying to better themselves, which I love Star Trek, don't get me wrong, but I also like this kind of gritty, realistic sort of portrayal of humanity, and humans are flawed, obviously, and so the flaws that come out a lot,
Yes.
and people are dealing with it. And the other thing is the characters have evolved over time, and you're getting more snippets of them, and you're getting more bits of information. And but I guess the real question is, will there be a happy ending for everybody? Will Holden and Naomi go off and
I don't
into the
know.
sunset and be happy?
It,
And
as long as
will drummer get to go home? Will I don't know.
yeah, as long as Amos is the last man standing, I'll be happy. But I
Yeah.
wanted to give a quick shout out to Wes Chatham because his acting as Amos just continues to floor me. That confrontation with Naomi, and when she like says something to him pretty venomously, here's this guy that has no compunction with killing when it's necessary, and he like he has this expression that's just like he's cowed, and he's like at the same time horrified that, like you said, here's someone that has been like my sister or an extension of me for all this time, and now we're divided, and it bothered him, and it's like things don't bother Amos, and that just really struck him hard, and it's like, wow,
Well,
that's
that's the thing.
that was just well
Yeah,
played and well acted.
about Amos, if we're going to talk about him, is that the more you humanize him, or the more he's become human, the more he's subject to emotions, right? Because he was like a more of an
Right.
automaton back then, and just like, I'm going to keep all this stuff in check. But now that he's opened up to other things, like even being in love, maybe even, yeah, you could see it on his face. It was really well done. I was going to actually mention that too. I'm glad you did. But yeah, you could see on Wes Chatham's face when she sort of attacked him. He's like, whoa. He's like, sort of a shadow went across his face. Like,
Yeah.
damn, that hurt. He was hurt.
Yeah.
And because
Yeah.
Naomi's probably the only one that could hurt him like that, right? Because he worshipped her for a long time. But he's an interesting character. I've always been a fan of his character because he kind of was totally allegiant to her, and then he transferred his allegiance to Holden, right? And now he does
Yeah.
whatever Holden
Yeah.
says, because he's the kind of person who just, if he's with you, he's with you, right? And he will
Yeah.
kill or sacrifice himself for you. So this has become, and people talk about the idea of extended families, surrogate families, whatever. She's like maybe his sister, or maybe almost his mom in a way that he never had. I mean, they're the same age basically, but the fact that she would say that to him was very hurtful to him. And he's starting to lose faith in the whole idea of the thing. I think he'll never betray Holden. It's just he's starting to lose faith in general of the entire process.
Well,
But
and it's funny you kind of mentioned their relationship being kind of like a mother sister kind of thing, which I agree. But he's now transferred
hmm
that to Peaches. He's kind of adopted her and is like, I'm gonna father her
well,
and
he's
make
performing the same function that Naomi performed for him,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
He's
exactly.
he's yeah
It's really cool.
he's taking care of something. He cares about Peaches. I think he loves her. I think that it's his
Yeah.
first time, because I don't think he was ever like in love romantically with Naomi. I just think that
Right.
he was like almost a lost puppy in a way, and she kind of took him in, and he bonded with her like, now you're gonna, whatever. But now I think he's doing the same thing with Peaches, because there was no real reason for him to break her out of jail and all that other stuff. He's just, he wants to.
Well, I think he sees himself in
Yeah,
her, and it's kind of like, I want to make sure she doesn't end up like me,
right.
and this is something I can do, and I have a lot to offer her as far as life experience and guiding
Well,
her.
and
And he's like,
maybe a lot to
you know,
redeem him in his mind too, because he hasn't
yeah,
led the best
yeah,
life, and maybe he feels like he owes, to try to be a good person. But I don't see. I mean, I hate to say this, but I don't see a way out for Amos in the show. I kind of feel like Amos is gonna, you know,
make the big
die
sacrifice.
heroically. Maybe, yeah. I don't know. I just feel like a lot, because Holden is Holden. Holden's a hero, right? He's always been a hero. But Amos was I mean, for all intents and purposes, a bad guy in a way, if you think about it, and not a good person, and has tried to redeem himself through the entire show, which is again why I think he's one of the most interesting characters.
Yeah.
But I don't know that what he's done in the past can be redeemed. So in a way, how can he live happily ever after? I don't know.
Well, he has shown, I mean, time and time again, that for Naomi and now Holden and whatever their cause is at the time, he's willing to, hey, I'll be the one who stays behind, or I'll sacrifice myself. And they're like, no, 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 come on.
Well,
But so he's like not against that. So I can see very easily he'd be like, yep, I'm going to do this so you guys can go off and finish this or whatever. So
yeah, exactly. I'm going to stay here and hold these shutters open so the nuclear bomb can get inside this thing. Oh wait, no.
Exactly.
But it's just, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that's a way for him to die heroically. I think in some ways
Yeah.
Amos needs to die heroically to finally sort of redeem himself. But I also think that in some ways Amos has a kind of a death wish. He's just looking for excuses and reasons to stay alive. He's just not. That's why he latches onto causes and people, because he probably doesn't feel like he deserves to live. So he's just basically, which is why, he takes chances. He always wants to fight people. It's like, I'd be fine if I died in a way. So, and I think we touched on that before a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's why I find him very, very fascinating character. And Wes Chatham does a really great job. He's definitely evolved. His performance as the character has evolved over the years too. And Stephen Strait too. Holden, I think, is used to be, I don't know. He was kind of like much more stoic and much more kind of, kind of almost annoying in the first season. But he's grown. He's grown on me a lot for sure. I'm still, Naomi's fine. She just never did that much for me. But anyway, but Avasarala, man, just make a whole show.
She's a bad. I do like that everyone calls her Avasarala or Madam Secretary, and yet Amos is calling her Chrissy.
Chrissy, yeah. Well, they've gone through some shit together, right?
they have.
So, and I would say I think that Avasarala and Bobby should just like get an apartment together and sort of just like live as roomies,
I think it'll be, everything will be settled. What I'd like to see, I would totally watch a sci-fi like PI series with Avasarala and Bobby. She's Avasarala is like the PI you go to for help, and Bobby is her muscle.
Right. Yeah.
I would totally watch a series based on that. That would be great.
It was a great bit of character for Bobby too. It's like, you're a Marine, you don't want to be sitting here doing nothing. So here, go to the ship and kick some ass, because she's got to like bust some skulls. She's basically bored. So.
And I like Avasarala, like, really likes Bobby, but I like her giving her crap, like, you don't like this job either. And she's like, no. And she's like, well, if I have to do mine, you're going to do yours. It's like, you're not getting out that easy.
but then like in the next sentence or the next part of that scene, she's like, you know what, they've discovered this thing, and then you're going to go with, I mean, she obviously goes to the ship, right? She meets up with the Rossi.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there's a scene in the trailer where she comes onto the Rossi. So obviously they're going to get together.
Yeah.
I think it's good for me because I haven't read the books, that I'm just experiencing this from the TV show. Like with Game of Thrones, I really think that in some ways reading the books would have been a negative, because you get to, figure out these characters. I don't know what's happening. And that's what I like about this show. I can't.
Yes.
Usually with shows, I can tell you what's going to happen by the end. Simply because there's just, only so many ways to write a show. And, there are some rules you have to follow. But with something like this, I don't know who will survive. I'm not 100% sure what will happen. There will be a battle. Marco will be killed, and maybe Amos will kill Marco, in an act of defiance, or Drummer. But I'm happy that Cara G's back with Drummer, and obviously they made a point of showing her taking off her outfit so you can see that she's not pregnant anymore.
Right, exactly. We don't have to just show her from the chest up anymore.
She's lost the baby weight, apparently, folks.
Yes.
So I bet
Drummer's the coolest too. They're just such great characters.
Yeah.
I mean, even like I still like miss Miller, because he was just such a great character and well done.
Yeah. Drummer's.
That's why, to me, again, Marco shows up as a sore thumb.
He does kind of
exactly what it is.
He and the kid and his son both sort of stand out as kind of like not great actors. But again, as a bad guy, it's hard to follow, Jared Harris, or it's hard to follow. I mean, I would even have liked Jason, or what's his name, David Strathairn, to stay around. I think he would have been a great bad guy too. I still think about that scene with him and Drummer when they're stuck under that machine in the dock. I mean, that was a great scene with just two people like talking for 40 minutes. That was a great episode.
They settle their differences, basically. It was like, wow, that was crazy.
Well, that's good writing, and you don't necessarily see things like that in TV shows, because you got to move on, you got to go fast, you got to do this, you got to do that. You don't have time for that character development, and that's, I think, another hallmark of this show, is that they've taken the time for the character moments, and they've taken the time for the character development, and that comes through with characters that you care about, and that's hard to do sometimes. And there's a lot of pressure in regular TV to sort of get to the point and solve the thing in 40 minutes. But with this, I mean, that's also one advantage of not, having commercials and not having, that kind of structure. It's like we can take 6 years to tell the story that we want to tell, and
exactly
with the people who want to tell it, and it works out great, unless one of the actors is, does something stupid, and so.
Unless one of them turns out to be a dick, and then they've
Yeah,
got to
God,
fire him. But
that's a bummer, man. But anyway, because Alex was a good character. He was a good character for the show,
he was a great
and he
character.
was
Yeah,
he was very important to the series and to the other characters. I mean, he was, like you said, one of the Fantastic Four, and to have that happen had to have been a blow for everybody. But
yeah,
I think they did the right thing, and they dealt with it as best they could, and they've obviously turned it to a positive and made it into good drama, which is what writers
yeah.
do. So you just move on, but it is a bit of a bummer.
Well,
But
I mean, it's sort of a. I don't want to put a positive spin on something, an unfortunate situation, but in a way, it's a quote unquote happy accident because it also we have 6 episodes left, and hey, at the end of this season, here's a main character, and we killed them, so all bets are off, right? That raises the stakes. What could anybody
well,
could get killed at this
it's the
point,
end of the
right?
show, so
So
anybody. And then, like you said, there's a 30-year
right,
time
so
jump between this and new stories. Do these characters appear in the after 30 years? I don't even know. So anybody,
I know, but I'm not going to
oh,
spoil it.
good. Anybody's fair game, I guess, or almost anybody. But
Yeah, yeah.
but it's the future, so people live longer, right? So I mean, I
Well, yeah,
think that they
yeah,
could do this show. I don't know if they'd age up everybody, but I think they could, maybe wait a couple of years and bring back the people they need to bring back, and they could just, play most of the characters they could play. So, oh, so you know
yeah.
how this is going to end then?
I don't know how it ends, but I know as far. Well, so here's the thing. I know in the books who continues after the 30-year time jump. I don't know how this part of the story ends, but here's the other thing too. There are characters, Alex obviously, but there are other characters that didn't exist in the book, and others that have died that are still alive. So I don't know necessarily
Is
that. I know that the writers are involved in this, but it doesn't necessarily have to end however the book ended
well,
with the
true.
characters.
Was
So
Alex in the book?
yeah,
Okay, yeah. So, but he lives, I would imagine.
yeah, yeah. No, he continues on in the books. So that's a big difference right there.
Not
So
in this, not
even
in this show.
I would say even if you read the book, you may know like kind of the broad terms of what's going to happen, but I don't think you know what's ultimately going to happen on the show.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
um,
Anyway, it's just well done, hard sci-fi drama
yeah,
with really well done characters for the most part. I mean, some of the things are. I mean, you sacrifice some things for other things. Maybe the Marco Inaros character is not as well defined as he could be, but he's serving a purpose. He's like a focal point for Marco is sending these meteors to destroy the Earth. But I think it's going to turn out that he's not the real sort of threat. It's just the idea of
yeah, yeah.
Inners versus Belters. That's the whole thing. It's like, can't we all just get along? He's just a catalyst for change,
I
I
kind
guess.
of
So
I kind of wonder with him if it's going to wind up at the point, kind of like what you said, that his lieutenant he's basically started something and pushed something, and then he gets to the point where he's like, "This is not quite what I meant," and but at that point, it's like way too out of control, and
right.
he's like realizes, I don't know, maybe that's the
Well, I can't.
stereotype we were talking about
I
that,
can't remember the actress's name, but she's been in a bunch of stuff. She's not like an unknown who's playing his sort of second in command now. I
right,
can't remember
right,
her name, but she was she's been around for a long time and done a lot of things, and she's actually got a special credit in the credits. So it's possible that she's going to be like, fuck this guy's lame, and you know, whip.
Well, yeah, because he's whipping them up into her fervor, and I think eventually he's going to be like, "Well, now we have them where we want, and we can get what we want," and everyone else around him is going to be like, "Oh, no, 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 we're going to wipe them out," and he's like, "Whoa, what?"
Right, I was just trying to get laid. I don't know what you guys are doing, but
Yeah, exactly. And I
anyway.
wanted to throw a few rocks at him and get recognized, and they're like, "No, we
Well,
want to wipe them out,"
I think it'll come down to that he didn't really have a plan, and it's just like these. Yeah, like you said, he's whipping him
Yeah,
into a fervor, and he's got like, let's do this and that, and then now what? I don't know. I don't know what to do. And the lieutenants or his kid is going to realize, I don't know what's going to happen with the kid. The kid is a mystery to me. The kid is a hothead.
because his second in command could totally kill him
Yeah,
and say, "Oh, the Earthers killed our Marco. Now we need to wipe him out." as she's cycling the airlock, she's like, "Oh, you'll still be a symbol and you'll still help us, but you're no longer needed."
As a symbol, you can't be corrupted, but as a
Right.
he'll be the Batman for
Yes.
this thing. But anyway, yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
interesting. That I don't know if it'll go that way. In fact, it probably won't. But
Yeah,
that is an interesting twist. Girls will get it done, right? And so
exactly.
I was just thinking about that. Anyway,
So,
that's it. They do a joke about that in The Boys, a show you don't like, I know, but
I haven't watched the show yet, so I can't say I don't
give it
like
a
the show.
give it
I
a
just don't
shot.
like the comic
Give
book.
it a shot.
Okay.
Give it a shot.
All right.
All right, so we'll definitely revisit The Expanse. We'll probably talk about it every week for the next 6 weeks
definitely.
or so. And I will be sad when it's over, but then we've always got it. We can always go back and watch it again, or maybe I'll go back.
But I'm happy that it existed. So
That's exactly right, and I'm happy it exists in this time. It's a
Yep.
gift, and I like it's the holidays, and so I'm happy to have gifts.
There you go. Yes.
It's a Christmas miracle. So
Speaking of Christmas,
speaking of
miracles,
Christmas, that's right. We got to talk about Hawkeye real quick too. Not real quick, but or whatever, because
Yes.
this show is already long, as they always are. But
Sure.
but yes, Hawkeye, episode 4, partners, right?
That was a great episode.
Yeah, the thing I
really,
liked
really
about
enjoyed it.
and they've only got what 6 episodes or something like that, but
Yeah, so there's only 2 more.
right, they're taking the time to have a pretty lengthy scene with Clint and Kate just talking about stuff. And as we sort of predicted, Kate does figure out that he was Ronin, which wasn't that hard to figure out. And they she seems cool with it in a way, right? It's like, you had to do, it's a different time. You had to do what you had to do. It must have been a bummer that your family got snapped away. So she's willing to accept a lot. And of course, we didn't get our big reveal of Kingpin yet, but we did get another big reveal that everyone
We
knew was
did.
coming. So this is
Yes.
spoilers for Hawkeye. If you haven't watched, I should have said spoilers for Expanse too, but I didn't. But Yelena Belova shows up at the end.
Yes.
Very exciting.
So a payoff of the end credit sequence in Black Widow. She finally catches up with Hawkeye. So
That's right. So it makes me
Yes.
wonder when the scene with her and what's her face, Valentina, takes place, because that could have been, because Kate's mom calls somebody, right? So is she calling? I thought she was calling Kingpin, but was she calling Valentina?
Oh, that could be.
I know who Ronan is. It's Hawkeye, and so that's we need to have him eliminated. He's getting too close. So Valentina's like, you need to kill this guy because this is the guy that killed your sister. So I'm wondering when that scene takes place. I was thinking about that when I was watching the episode. I was like, oh, well, that makes sense because maybe that's who she called. Will Valentina show up in this episode or in this show? I don't know. But I do think Kingpin is still in the mix.
We could totally get a flashback to that end credit scene, by the way, because they've been pretty liberal about having scenes from the movies in flashbacks.
Well, they had Scarlett
show,
Johansson in
so-
last week's episode, so it's not
Right,
I
exactly.
mean, they own
So-
that footage. I guess they can do whatever they want with it. But
Well, yeah, of course, of course. So,
but yeah, I really like this episode a lot. And the only thing that was kind of felt sort of forced to me in some ways is splitting up Kate and Clint. It's like, oh, you go and get my arrow shafts or whatever. You go back to the LARPers. I know you wanted to bring the LARPers back in and all that stuff, but it just seemed weird that.
I don't know, it was kind of funny.
But then they got the police officer who's willing to like tamper with evidence just because someone asked, although she's a character in the comics, right? That's Bombshell, right? Because it says Bombshell in her
Yes.
bag, so she's actually somebody in the comics. But I don't know if she'll actually be Bombshell.
Exactly.
But she's awfully willing to just like abandon her police ethics or whatever.
Well, for an Avenger, sure.
I guess, but it's just some kid shows up. As, I'm working for the Avengers. Like, sure you are, whatever, kid. You're carrying a bow and arrow around, which makes perfect sense because you're with a bunch of LARPers, I guess. But
Right, exactly.
so I don't know. I really liked the episode, but that kind of felt weird to me that they split them up. But I guess they had to, right? So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I liked that. I think we talked about this before, that before the big battle or the big climax of the show, you got to have the two good guys fall out, and they did in this one because Clint's like, this is bigger. You need to be out of this. Go away.
well, he cut her loose, much like it was kind of like a parallel to what happens with him and Natasha, right? But she falls into some pretty Christmas lights instead, which I thought was cool because there's a shot, like an overhead shot, where they're sticking out the apartment, and you see the lights. So you're like, oh, later it makes sense that she fell into those things. But
Yeah,
I mean, I guess the biggest takeaway from this episode is that Kate gets her sort of, I'm not going to take the shot. What's the best shot you ever took? The one I didn't take. So she gets her, I didn't take the shot. That's my best shot moment, right? With Yelena.
Right.
So it's like now she's taking over as Hawkeye in a way. And now this new Black Widow will be her Natasha, right? So that's why they don't.
Yeah.
Because I think Elena's like, no, don't do it. Because so my thing about her like shaking her head or whatever is like she's saying, don't try it, kid, because I'll kick your ass. Or is she saying things aren't what you think they are? Don't do it.
Well, I think it's a combination, but I almost think, kind of like to your point, that she's saying that don't get. She is from kind of the school of Hawkeye. She's like, don't take this shot, you'll regret it, kind of thing. Don't do it.
Well, yeah.
Don't be that.
Yeah.
Don't go that way.
I mean, it's like, the point of the whole thing was the setup of Kate not trying to kill her, right?
Yeah,
so it's like
exactly.
she needs to have that moment where, because Clint's like, I just knew that she was trying to get out, and so it's the same thing with Kate. It's like, she knew that Yelena was trying to, which is why I think that Yelena was like, don't do it. It's not, which is also why she saves her, right? She puts the thing on her and throws her over the side, and doesn't kill her. Instead, puts her on the cable, and then sort of disappears, which I thought was kind of interesting. But and another question I had about the whole Black Widow situation was that those widow's bites didn't seem too powerful either. So I wonder if you can set those to a certain level, because no one seemed to be phased. I mean, Clint just took it off of his son. He's like, this is nothing, And
so did Echo. Yeah. She just pulled them off. Yeah, so it's like, well, those aren't very effective.
Well, I remember them being more effective in other in movies and whatever. So I'm wondering if Yelena is just going through the motions. She doesn't think that. I don't think she thinks that Clint killed Natasha. So I don't know. Well,
she's just trying to find out what's going on, or tell him, hey, by the way, somebody sent me to kill you. You might want to be aware of that.
Yeah. Because I'm wondering if at what point in history this is, because in the trailer for the next episode, there's definitely a scene where Yelena is back in her white outfit, which is the outfit she was wearing at the end of Black Widow. And there's a fight scene that she's having with a woman in an apartment building or whatever. And there's definitely other Black Widows there. So I'm wondering if again, it's like right after they left, because if you remember in the end of Black Widow, she gets in a helicopter with a bunch of the freed Black Widows, right? Still wearing her white outfit, and they just disappear. So I feel like the scene with Val is basically, a month later from that. And she gets the call from Kate's mom saying, we have a problem. I need some help. And, Hawkeye is a pain in the ass. You have to take him out. And so, but I think that.
So she's like, something's going on. Yeah. So I'm going to.
Well, yeah, because I think Yelena knows that Clint is not a bad guy. And I think that she knows, because, they even talk about it a little bit about Budapest. And,
yes, exactly.
That Clint is a good guy, right? And that Natasha respected him and cared about him and everything. And so. Yelena is just going through the motions, I think, and trying to figure out, because she's not going to try to be a bad guy, obviously, because she's taking over for Scarlett Johansson, right? So she's not going to be a baddie necessarily. So, but yeah, I thought that was well done, and we're going to get more Yelena next week, and more other things. The other thing that I thought was interesting is the further developments in the Clint's wife is actually a super spy world, right?
Well, that's what they keep saying. Although I got to say, that's got to be I just really like the fact that the way they play their marriage. I mean, it's probably the best marriage in the MCU, and it's obvious from the conversation.
Isn't it kind of the only marriage in the MCU?
Yeah, probably. It's obvious from the conversation that they had in this episode, and I think it was, we were aware of it, that he doesn't hide anything from her, and so it's obvious from the conversation they had that he's told her all about being Ronin. And what he went through because of, the comments that she makes and the way they talk about it. I was like, that's really cool. I like the fact that he's not like, I got to hide this from my family and stuff. He's like, nope, this is this is what I went through, and this is what I am.
Which brings up the point of, which reinforces the idea that she was S.H.I.E.L.D. at one point or something, because she knows the deal. She knows that he's an Avenger, but also originally was a trained, assassin or whatever.
And he goes to her to get intel, which she does.
Right, which is amazing that she gets that from her living room in like 5 minutes. Like,
right.
Who's Jack? What does Jack do? Oh, Jack does this. So how did she?
Yeah, let me call you back in 5 minutes.
How did she get that information? Does she have a source in the tracksuits or something? I don't know. But it's like, how did she
Right.
get that information? And so, and speaking German, just fluent German all of a sudden, the whole thing. So I think that
Yeah.
Laura Barton's going to end up being maybe, like they did with the Widows, maybe she's going to be like an earlier version of Mockingbird, because they do have Bobby Morris as Mockingbird in
Agents of
Agents of Shield.
Shield.
Although
Yeah.
maybe that's not canon. Maybe she is Mockingbird in this. I don't know,
Maybe. Who
but
knows?
that'd be
Yeah.
cool. And I like Linda Cardellini, so good for her. I'd love to see her in the MCU more. But you're right. I think that her relationship with Clint is really well done. I think they have a sort of a relationship built on trust and mutual respect, which is what marriage is supposed to be, right?
I know. So
So
shocker, huh?
shocker, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, he doesn't try to hide anything. Which, if anything, at the very least, this show has made me like Hawkeye as a character more. And also, I think
Yeah.
Jeremy Renner is doing an excellent job. The scene with him and Kate talking about how he started out as a weapon and all that. I think people forget that he's actually a pretty good actor. I think sometimes,
Yeah. Exactly.
um,
Yeah.
an Academy Award nominated actor, as a matter of fact.
Indeed.
But and so he's getting a chance to do more stuff than just shoot arrows, which he probably didn't get to have much character development in the Avengers movies or whatever. But at least in this, he's he's getting to have a fully represented character, which I'm sure is one of the reasons that Jeremy Renner wanted to do it. Because
Oh yeah.
I don't feel
Absolutely.
like his contract was still going on with Disney. They probably had to renegotiate for this, but maybe not. I could be wrong. But so what do you think they're protecting in the watch? What is it?
That's what I want to know. Whose watch is that? Because it was like it's an old friend, and if it gets out, he'll be exposed.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it can't be Tony because Tony's dead.
Well, and
So it wouldn't
it's not
matter.
gonna be
I
it's not
mean,
gonna be Nick Fury because Nick Fury doesn't care.
no.
Um,
I mean, yeah. I
is it
don't.
Laura? I mean, I don't know. Or is it there's other people talking about, and this isn't my theory necessarily, although I did think of it, because we know that Secret Wars or Secret Invasion's coming up. So is it some kind of Skrull thing, maybe? Or somebody was speculating that Clint and his entire family are already Skrulls, which I thought was kind of funny. But
That would be funny if the last episode they
they
changed it
just
to
changed it to
Skrulls.
Skrulls. Yeah, well, I mean, it's not
Yeah.
unprecedented, right? I mean, Nick Fury
Well, that's true.
and
It's it's got to be. It seems to be someone important to
yeah,
Clint, though, specifically.
right. Which makes me
Um,
think it could be his wife. But I mean, why would she wouldn't wear a Rolex like that? I mean, it's an ugly red Rolex.
yeah,
So
but yeah, because of the discussion that they're having, doesn't seem like it. It doesn't seem like it's that personal to her. Only that she knows how important it is to Clint, and he's the one that's like,
right. So
I give, I'm a Wookiee who gave a life debt, and I'm going to make sure
right.
this.
So it's someone that Clint cares about, and it's someone that he's willing to sacrifice a lot to protect and get this thing. And I mean, he also says, I don't like the idea of other stuff from the Avengers compound floating around, which makes sense.
Yeah.
But what we didn't get, and I was sort of disappointed because it looks like Jack is just going to be a bad guy. Maybe I don't know if he's still a front or a
I don't
patsy.
even know if he's going to be a bad guy anymore either. I think
Well,
it's
he runs.
Kate's
Well,
mom.
no, but I think she is definitely. But I think
Oh, that's right.
yeah, but
Yeah, he
Jack runs
does.
that business that Kazi works for. But he
Yeah.
didn't just go, I think this is your sword. So we're not going to get that Clint and swordsman kind of relationship that we get in the comics, but that's okay.
No, no.
But also, I was really disappointed there wasn't any Lucky the Pizza Dog in this episode either. But
Right. It's like, what's wrong with that? Come on. We need more
where
Lucky.
was Lucky? Oh, and of course, one other piece of very important information. One of the movies that she brings home for him was Die Hard. So I'm just saying, because Die Hard is a Christmas
Yes.
movie, as we all know. So and I'll be
Yes.
watching it next week, as I always do every year.
Absolutely. Yep.
If you haven't actually, this is interesting. They talk about there's a screenwriting podcast that I listen to with Craig Mazin and oh god, I'm going to forget people's names, but they talk about Die Hard at length, which is fun. But the most recent one was one for Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is also really super interesting. So,
Nice.
but
Nice.
anyway, the episode is just I love the fact that they're taking the time with people and they're taking the time to build Clint's character for sure, and also giving us more stuff with Laura and the family, and and it was nice to see Elena. I'm not gonna lie, Florence Pugh is a welcome addition to the MCU for sure, in my opinion. So
Well, so apparently someone involved with the show is saying that episode 5 is going to break Twitter. So
break the
I
internet.
would imagine that's the one where we find out we get the reveal of Wilson Fisk probably.
Or,
So
and I'm just going to throw this out here in a really, really, really wild bit of information. She's still alive.
Natasha.
She's the one that's undercover. That watch has some information about where Natasha is. Somehow she ended up being alive with the snap or whatever. Or, I mean, the other thing is in the multiverse, it's easy.
Well-
it's easy to bring people back. But I'm just saying Natasha could be still alive. Although they make a big point of he tried to bring her back and he couldn't do it. But I don't know. I can't think of anybody else that Clint cares about that much, unless it's his family or there's something with Laura. But I mean, that would definitely break the internet if Scarlett Johansson just showed up, right?
And I would not be against that, to be honest.
Well, it's comics, man. No
that would
one
be
stays
cool.
dead.
Yeah,
in comics,
exactly.
man. How many times did people get killed? Captain America got shot a couple times. I mean, people die, and they come back. So but how they do it is the important thing. But it's either that or as Feige pointed out now. Yeah, if we're gonna do Daredevil, Charlie Cox is gonna be Daredevil. So maybe Daredevil shows up as Charlie Cox shows up.
Maybe he and
Fisk.
Matt Murdock have a history. So
yeah, I don't.
Maybe Clinton and Matt Murdock are old pals or something.
And we didn't talk about that at all this week, but I'm happy to hear that. If he did, as we've talked about before, he did a phenomenal job as Daredevil in the Netflix shows, and the fact that he's going to get to play Daredevil again, I think is great. It's a great choice. I mean, why would you?
Yeah.
If you have somebody that great, why would you bother looking around for anybody else? You already have a built-in person with a built-in fan base, and also with Wilson Fisk, Vincent D'Onofrio was an amazing Kingpin. I would bring, and just Jessica Jones, I'd bring her back. She was great. I wouldn't necessarily bring back Iron Fist guy, but the rest of them.
Luke Cage, though. Mike Coulter.
Mike Coulter,
Luke Cage.
Yeah, bring Mike Coulter back.
I hate to be that guy because these are the internet speculators that I hate, but I think
worst internet ever.
Yes, I don't think, so I think he's definitely coming back as Daredevil because I don't think Feige would have phrased it the way he did. I think he would have just said, "Oh yeah, we really like Charlie Cox, and if we get to that point, we'll definitely take a look at that." He was very specific.
He wouldn't have said anything about it.
Yeah, but he was very specific about if we were to have Daredevil, it would definitely be Charlie Cox, and we'll see how that pans out or something down the road. So it's like, okay, so he's definitely coming back. I mean, it just seems like you don't say it that way. You're right. He would have just like either dismissed it or just been like, oh yeah, if we decide to do that, well,
He made a point of answering the question. He made a point of saying Charlie Cox is our Daredevil, basically, and when he comes back in whatever form that is, then he will be Daredevil, and which means that he's canon, which means they all could be. So.
Right.
But I guess the question is, will Wilson Fisk, Kingpin, Vincent D'Onofrio be a break the internet moment? I don't know. I mean, it's a big deal, but maybe not as big a deal as that. But Natasha coming back would be a big deal. So
that would definitely break the internet, I think.
Or it's Tony Stark. Maybe Tony Stark still.
Tony shows up. Yes, he's actually he downloaded his subconscious, much like the glasses being another AI. He actually put his subconscious in that watch. That's what's or it's Ultron.
Although it would be impossible for them to be full of shit too, because look at the whole thing with even Paul Bettany was participating in that sort of bullshit. It's like the greatest actor I've ever worked with, etc. But it turns out to be me in a white outfit.
Yeah.
So you can't necessarily trust everything that they say. So I definitely
maybe it's going to break the internet because there's no reveal.
Because there's no reveal. I mean, I guess the truth is next week is going to be a Yelena episode for sure, and that'll get resolved somehow. And then the final episode, I mean, it could just be Wilson Fisk. Just they open a door and there he is. That could be
they walk by and he's in the background.
Yeah, like in Daredevil, it's like they open the door and all the X-Men are in there, but they close the door. We can't afford that.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
No, I think it'll be like a Godfather moment where like Wilson Fisk is in a room and like we go outside and they close the door and we can't go into that room, right? And that's going to be it,
right? And that's it.
Yeah, they don't have to show much of anything. I mean, they could just have him appear for 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be a big thing. I mean, but next, obviously, I'm very interested to see what happens. But will it destroy my life if it's not Natasha or whatever? I doubt it.
I think at this point, it's because I was never convinced with the Mephisto theories for WandaVision. And it was like, well, there's nothing overt. But I think at this point, they've kind of pushed too many almost direct clues, and if everyone is correct, actually using D'Onofrio's voice for a laugh. If it's not, if they don't have Kingpin show up, it's I would I would be like, okay, I can't trust anything you do from now on because you are pushing so hard in this, and then it's like, oh, it's really Jack, and he's taking over Fisk's empire and mimicking his voice. That's what that was. It'd be like, okay, no.
Well, here's one more twist maybe, and then we could finish up. But one
Sure,
more
sure.
twist is, if you recall, in Rogers the Musical, they show Ant-Man in the Battle of New York, and even Clint
They do.
remarks that, oh, Ant-Man wasn't there.
Yeah.
So and they also showed Pym-Tech in his arrow. So the question
Yeah.
is it somebody like Ant-Man, because it is Ant-Man colored watch, right? It is red. Or maybe it has something to do with Pym or Hank Pym or Scott Lang or whatever. Is it some kind of Ant-Man thing? Maybe it's something like that. But would that be, I mean, and also if you remember, Scott and Clint were the two that were under house arrest. So they have a sort of a somewhat connection like that too, right?
Oh, that's true.
So I'm
That's
wondering
true.
if Ant-Man is undercover somewhere, or because we don't know what happens to him after Endgame, right? We don't know what happens after the end.
Well, we'll find out, but maybe that leads into
Maybe
Quantumania.
it does. Maybe it does. So I don't know. That's just maybe it was interesting because you do see, not only do you see Ant-Man, but Clint mentions it specifically that he wasn't there. They talk about Ant-Man. So
Yeah, that's true.
that's, maybe that's a red herring, but it is interesting. And the watch is red, and an ugly red Rolex could be Hank Pym would wear an ugly red Rolex, maybe. So I don't know.
It's all
And he also
connected,
says there are
Chris.
no more trick arrows, maybe because
Um,
something's, whatever. I don't know. Anyway, but it is all connected. So okay, so
yeah.
obviously we're gonna keep watching Hawkeye and find out what happens. I keep calling her Kate's mom. I really feel bad about that, but
Kate's mom.
Kate's mom's got it going on, right?
That's like when you write a note for yourself at school and you sign it,
Epstein's mother.
you
No,
know, Joe's mom or Chris's mom. It's like, wait, what?
Eleanor Bishop. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Bishop Security. That's right.
She's the big bad.
You think so?
Yeah.
I mean,
Maybe not. I
in
don't know.
sort of in these sort of rules, I guess, of drama, you can't just introduce another character at the end who's behind it all. It was the kingpin all along, like with Agatha. It was Agatha the whole time,
But she was right there.
but she
Yeah.
was right there. You don't just throw a character. It's like Deus Ex bad guy, right? It's like someone comes in from nowhere and is the actual bad guy. But she did call somebody, but she could be the main
Yes.
bad guy if she called Valentina instead of
That's right.
Fisk.
Exactly.
So there you go. That's my theory. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it isn't Wilson Fisk at all. I mean, Uncle is somebody, but
She thinks she gets away after whatever big battle and stuff in episode 6, and she's on the run, and
then Uncle shows up.
she's like, I'm going to go to Uncle to get me out of this, and he's like, no, you've made too much of a mark, and
You've made it.
exposed my
You've
operation.
made it
So
messy. You got to go, and she dies.
yeah,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
that's interesting. That's
exactly,
interesting, and that's as much Wilson Fisk as you need, right?
exactly. You just need him for a scene,
Right.
and
Just like
that's good.
he slams her in a car door like 20 times, and that's the end.
Yeah, exactly,
He doesn't like mess.
exactly.
Well, that was also a telling conversation, and again, we should move on, but that was a telling conversation between Clint and Kazi, right, in the car. It's like, your boss does not like attention. Your boss does not like,
Right.
and so Uncle is definitely not Eleanor Bishop. So there
No.
is somebody else that she's working with. Maybe she'll end up being the big bad in this, and then, like you said, you know, he'll take exception to how she handles everything, and she will, think she's in the clear, and then be killed by Fisk and
I
his
thought I
henchmen.
was clear. I don't like
I don't
attention.
like attention. Yeah, and that's the end, right? He just comes out the elevator, and she's like, "Fuck," and that's the end.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah, that's the way to go. I don't think that. But the question is, that won't happen next episode. That'll probably be in the finale, right? In the final episode. So what is going to
Yeah,
happen next week? That's such a big deal.
because you're right. The him being a reveal and then the big battle against him. It's kind of like you said. You don't just throw a character at the end. It's got to be Jack or Eleanor that they're fighting against. So to have him show up and be like, "Oh no, no, now they're all going to fight," Kingpin, it's like, that
Well, it
seems
looks like the
weird.
finale happens at the party at that hotel, right, or at 30 Rock. So he's like swinging across the. I mean, there is a lot. The funny thing is, there are a lot of parallels to Die Hard in this movie. Like towards the end, I mean,
Right.
he's like swinging outside the building on a thing, and it's like what happens in Die Hard, and it's also at Christmas time, and it's. I think there definitely is some homage to Die Hard, but he's like running through the party. That's got to be in the finale, right? That's not next week. So I'm talking about
Yes.
what happens in the trailer. So next week is going to be
Right. Right.
Yelena, and they're going to resolve that somehow. And then maybe they'll figure out what's going on with the watch. Maybe Ant-Man shows up next week. I mean, I don't know. Who knows? But there'll be somebody, or
It'll
there won't.
it'll be Elena going, "Hey, somebody sent me after you. I don't know what's going on." And everyone else leaves the room, and Clint goes, "Hey, I'm glad you're back," or something. And she's got a shield mask on as Elena, and it's actually
There
Natasha.
you go. Yeah. Yeah. Or it's what's your face? But anyway, so find the Flickcast at Stitcher and Apple Podcasts and Google and Spotify and all the other places you find podcasts, and find Joe and I on the socials. Joe is at What Joe Writes. I am at Chris Yu on Twitter and Ulrich Picks on Instagram. And you can also find the Flickcast on Instagram at the Flickcast. And then, of course, we have a
Yes.
Patreon, patreon.com/theflickcast. If you love the show and want to support it financially, that would be awesome. Thank you. Ratings, reviews, all that stuff. Smash that like button, whatever you can
Yes.
do. And actually, I feel like I had a bit of energy during this episode, so that's good. But my energy is waning, so it's probably time to go.
This is a perfect time then to sign
This is
off,
the
I
perfect
think.
time to sign off. So, all right, cool. So for Joe Dilworth, I am Chris Lowrick. That was the Flickcast. Thanks so much for